large, thin arsenic bronze ones like this. They're like beer can metal thin. These are from Guerrero. These have a very high arsenic content. Along with those at the time, copper rings, little copper bells were used in trade in Aztec pre-Columbian times, as West Mexico and the Tarascan Kingdom, along with some fairly large copper bells. Gold dust was traded in quills, bird feather quills, with a little mesquite plug in the end. Gold objects, beads, shells, some stones, especially jade, were traded. The jade was prized highly enough that the Spanish, actually being just ignorant soldiers as they were, had no idea what the stuff really was. They talked about the Indians in Mexico trading in emeralds. No idea what a piece of jade was. And to sort of represent that jade stuff, I brought a little Olmec jade guy. In Mexico, jade was prized enough that a piece from, say, 3000 BC or 1000 BC could have been broken and reused and worked again and again and again all the way up to conquest times. In my own collection, I have a little Olmec bead that's probably about 500 BC that has been broken and it's reworked into, in Aztec times, into another little figurine. But you can still see that it started its life out as a bead. One of the more widely traded things in pre-Columbian Mexico were cocoa beans, the fruit of the cocoa tree, which today we enjoy as chocolate. These were so prized, you could actually, in Tenochtitlan, which later became Mexico City, you could buy a snow cone. It would actually send runners to the volcano to fetch snow, and they put honey on it and sold it as a refreshment. It was very expensive. It cost one of these. For a little handful of these, you could have bought a slave. These little guys, they were still in use as late as the 1550s in Mexico, and the Spanish had decrees about how many cocoa beans to the peso, or a real. Always a shortage, chronic shortage of small change in Mexico. During colonial times, for practical purposes, the smallest denomination they had was a half-real silver coin, which would be half a bit, about 6 1/4 cents in American money. Too much money for most transactions, especially when peons were making maybe 3 cents a day. So 6 1/4 cents being the smallest coin, that wasn't very convenient for most working poor people. So there was a dread of other things used in lieu of money. Soap and cocoa and tokens, all sorts of things were used in lieu of money. In colonial times, early on, the first mint in Mexico, the first mint established in the New World, was actually in Hernan Cortez's house. Previous to them being able to issue coins, a lot of trade was done in gold ingots, actually sort of round pies of gold. In the numismatic literature, they talk about those things not existing, that none of them are known. However, in 1965 in Florida, on the 1715 plate fleet wrecks, there were gold discs with Spanish tax markings found on them that fit exactly the description of what was called Tepusque gold, or those gold ingots that were traded as money before they started making coins. Anyway, 1536, they send a guy from Spain, governor, Antonio de Mendoza, and he helps a guy named Rincon establish a mint in Mexico City. And the first coins that they made, I've got an example or two of those here. They're almost like a medieval style coin with Gothic lettering. They call these sin agua, without water. The coins, they picture the pillars of Hercules, the gates of Gibraltar, with the legend plus ultra, meaning more beyond, meaning there's a new world beyond the gates of Gibraltar. There's an early series here, silver 1 real. Also a copper 4 maravedis. These things, they only made them for a short period of time. The Aztec Indians thought that these, well, the people that would have received money would thought that being paid in copper was disrespectful. So they actually, when they would receive these, would throw them in the lake or throw them in the gutter. Most of them that are on the market today have been dug up out of the ground because they were thrown away. So those were miserable experiments, and they stopped doing those. Didn't really make any copper coins official government issue again until 1814, during the War of Independence. I have here a late series, or with water, con agua, 1 real. These were probably only started about 1570. The name that they're issued in is Carlos and Juana, who were long out of office. Most of these were actually issued under Philip II, long after the date of the king and queen that are listed on the coin. Mr. Rincon, the guy that opened up the mint there, about 1568-69, he was actually sent to Peru, and he opened up the first mint in Peru, La Plata, which today is Lima, and he took his punches with him from Mexico City, and he made the first coins of Peru, which I have one of those here, a 2 real. They're exactly the same style as the Mexican ones. Next thing that comes along is under Philip II, they stopped doing that Carlos and Juana style coin, and they start issuing their own coins, which today a lot of us call them cobs. I have examples here, a denomination set of various kings. I've got half real, 1 real, 2 real, 4 real, and 8 real. 8 real being the dollar piece, 2 real being 2 bits, a quarter. All of these things circulated all over the world. It's funny, before the New World discovery, silver and gold was actually fairly rare in the rest of the world. There was so much gold and silver pumped out of the New World that it actually caused inflation in Spain and Europe. Prices went through the roof. Spain had so much money pumped in that they actually pretty much stopped producing anything and just bought from all their neighbors. So too much money doesn't mean more business. I brought another little interesting cob just as kind of a sideline. This is a little 1 real cob. This is from a hoard that was found in Mexico City after an earthquake. It was found in a chapel. They call it the Guadalupe hoard. The earthquake put a crack in the adobe wall of the church, and in the crack were 15,000 of these little guys. This was back in the 70s. They still find stuff like that in Mexico. Sort of jumping ahead, I brought also 2 clippy style cobs here. They came from a treasure that was discovered here a few years back in Acapulco, in a cave. I've got a 4 real, 1730, and an 8 real here, 1730. I actually got to pick out of that hoard quite a bit, so besides the coins I bought and sold, I kept one of each assayer, and in that hoard I discovered 2 over-assayers that aren't listed, where the guy responsible for the quality of the silver changed, so the initial changed. I actually found 2 over-assayers in that stuff, but not listed at all. That's not unusual in Mexican coins. Overdates, dates that nobody's ever seen before, assayers' initials or over-assayer initials, that sort of thing pops up constantly. After the cob series sort of dies out, about 1729, 1730, they get new machinery from Spain to strike coins, actual screw presses rather than these older hand-hammered style coins. But they didn't have the equipment yet to actually produce round planchets. So for a couple of years, they're making the new style coin on the cob style planchet. They call them clippies. Then in 1732, they start experimenting with the pillar dollar design, or the pillar design. This actually is a pillar dollar. If you look in your red book by Yeoman, this is the first coin pictured in the red book. 1732, they weren't quite sure what they were doing as far as mint mark and that sort of thing. So they actually produced some coins that have no mint mark in Mexico. They just have the assayer's initial. They also produced coins that have the MO, Mexico City mint mark, and they also produced coins that have the MX mint mark. Only used that 1 year. Very strange. Actually, I should go back a little bit. only use 1733. I have two 1733 1 real pillars here. There's one with an MX mid-mark and one with an MO mid-mark. Fairly rare date. After that style coin runs through a couple of kings, from Philip II to Ferdinand VI. They, in 1772, they go to a portrait style coin. And they continue that all the way from Charles III up through Ferdinand VII. I brought a denomination set here, half real through 8 real, 1, 2, 4, and 8 real. And along with it, I put a colonial quarter real there. Didn't actually start producing those until 1789. The first ones produced in Mexico, and then later in other mints in the New World, Guatemala, Chile, etc. The first ones produced in Mexico for a long time in the literature, like the Krauss Standard Catalog of World Coins. They kept moving the undated ones with no mint mark around in the catalog. It seems like nobody was sure where they were from. But those coins actually show up as metal detector finds fairly often in Mexico, and it appears that vast numbers of them were struck in Mexico for export to the Philippines. They're really common over there. Now, of course, they would have circulated down further south to other Spanish colonies, so they found them in Guatemala and here and there. And they kept moving them around in the catalog. Oh, they're Guatemala. Oh, they're the Philippines. Oh, they're this. Oh, they're that. Because nobody knew. Well, they were struck in Mexico. So there's one of those here. I brought a couple of colonial gold coins, both during the pillar period and during the portrait period. In the 18th century, they issued gold coins with portraits on them. The first series, they called them peluconas. Peluca is a wig. Typical Baroque style costume, so the king has this big, long, curly wig on. After those, they go to a little more modern style coin, and that's what I have here. The two gold pieces, half a scudo and one escudo. Then we get to the War of Independence. 1810, Father Hidalgo, he first tries to rouse the Creoles, the Spaniards that were born in Mexico and were sort of second-class citizens in Spain. He tries to rouse them against the Spanish. Well, that didn't work, so then he went to the Indians and convinced them to revolt. And he winds up getting himself captured and shot. And his lieutenant, another Catholic priest, a fellow named Morelos, who's pictured on a lot of Mexican coins, later 20th century stuff. He takes up the fight for a while. He's also captured and shot. But under Morelos, the insurgent forces fighting against the Spanish issued quite a variety of coinage. I brought a few pieces of suds, 8 real coppers, and an 8 real silver. These were mostly done in Oaxaca. Though there's some question about some of them maybe having been done in Chiapas too. The Terra Caliente, the TC issues, maybe were done outside of Oaxaca. So I brought some of those. They come commonly with a lot of counter stamps. There's some here with the counter stamps for Morelos, a little monogram M. At the same time, in various places in Mexico, because of all the turmoil, the Spanish royalist forces are issuing coins, and rather than ship valuable bullion to Mexico City and risk losing it in transit, they opened up a bunch of sort of provisional branch mints in Zacatecas, Guadalajara, Guanajuato, Durango, all around where the silver mines were, so they could turn the money into coinage right away without having to move bullion anywhere. I brought a fairly decent condition Zacatecas provisional mint piece here. Now those things are so varied and there's so many varieties and uncatalogued things that at one time I collected only those, and I had another little box of them, and I would say probably 25% of them weren't mentioned in any catalog. The combination of edge treatment cast coin with counter marks, without counter marks, just all kinds of strange things. Portraits that are wrong, using the king's portrait from, say, a 1 real and putting it on a 2 real coin, so the portrait is tiny. Big portraits, little portraits, just varieties galore. I collected those until I got tired of it, and I realized it would never end. Anyway, War of Independence is over. The Creoles, interestingly interestingly, that Hidalgo tried to raise against the Spanish. They soon realized that the Spanish were pretty weak, so they had a chance of grabbing the pie for themselves. So they did. It's rather interesting, some of the modern coins Mexico's issued. One of them shows the heroes of the War of Independence. And it's got Morelos, Hidalgo, Vicente Guerrero, and Iturbide on there. And these two guys were Creole soldiers fighting for the Spanish who actually were instrumental in capturing and executing the other guys. It's kind of like having, I don't know, Benito Mussolini, Hitler, Churchill, and Roosevelt all on the same coin. It's like, what? Anyway, a Creole guy, Augustine Iturbide, who was an army officer in the Spanish army until he decided rebellion was better, he winds up being emperor for a couple of years, the first empire of Mexico. And I brought a couple of different 8 realities of Augustine Iturbide. A lot of variation in his coins, different portraits, a few different min marks, varieties. Again, it's an area that you can find stuff all the time that isn't cataloged and nobody has ever really studied it extensively. Even though Mexican coins have been studied pretty extensively. During all of this period, because of that chronic coin, small change shortage in Mexico, tokens were being issued by haciendas, by sugar mills, by all sorts of entities that were of sort of dubious value. And poor people were sort of dependent on this stuff that could be good today and worthless tomorrow. And that sort of over time leads to a system of debt peonage, sort of like you owe your soul to the company store, where you're paying your workers some tokens. The tokens are only good at your store has inflated prices, and they're always on the books owing you, and they can't leave, because if they do, you can have them arrested. Great. This eventually leads to the 1910 revolution in Mexico. And then the 1917 Constitution, the complete embargo against paying anybody in tokens any longer, mentioned specifically in their Constitution. Anyway, early Republican period, from the period about 1821 when the War of Independence is over through about the 1830s, pretty chaotic. Everybody running around doing all kinds of crazy things, trying to grab a piece of the pie and make themselves head cheese. During this period, again, chronic small change shortage, so states start issuing copper coins on their own. In some cases that worked pretty good, in some cases it didn't. No brakes on the issue, the amount of issue. So pretty much what state governments did was to finance their local politics and their state government, overissued the stuff to the point that it became worthless. And that was further aggravated by counterfeiters issuing stuff that was equally worthless, and then state governments doing decrees where you have to take the stuff, essentially making it, you have to even take the counterfeits. I didn't bring any, but I have some stuff from a cave that I screened out in Sonora, down at the Sierra de la Pintada. It was a counterfeiter's cave. They cut out of sheet copper, illegally imported into Mexico from England, the Aquinas. They cut out little planchets and struck these very, very crude coins with just rudimentary tools. I have a lot of, still have a lot of bow tie scrap and cutting planchets and defective planchets and whatnot. So I brought a little row of states coppers here. There's a lot of little anecdotal things with Mexican coins. And some of it, nobody knows why it happened. For instance, in Durango, the state of Durango issued a state copper, a quarter real, in 1872, long after any other state had stopped issuing the things, and long after anybody was using the denomination of quarter real. Why? No one knows. It's strange stuff. During the Republic period, that 1824 through about the 1860s, with the French intervention, they used these cap and ray silver coins in Mexico. I brought a set of those from a quarter real, which actually has a liberty head on it, up to the 8 real. These little guys, just like the Spanish dollars before them, they circulated all over the world. And they circulated in far-flung places very late. There was a U.S. Navy warship, the USS Charleston, struck a rock in 1903, I believe it was, in the northern Philippines, working against the Moros. And it had 25,000 US dollars in the safe. Well, not too long ago, Philippines fishermen discovered it. And interestingly, the stuff that's coming out of that shipwreck was mostly Mexican 8 reales and whatnot, some with chop marks and that sort of thing. That was what was acceptable locally as currency, and the US just put a dollar denomination on it. There's a little run of those here. At the same time, they, in Mexico, were issuing what are known as hand-on book, the gold series. I brought a set of those here. There's a half escudo, 1 escudo, 2, 4, and 8 escudo. And then I brought out an extra 8 escudo because it's Hermosillo, which is only 250 miles away from here. Sonora, Arizona, during this period, Mexican period, actually produced quite a bit of gold. If you look at mint records and gold production in Sonora from Mexico, all the spikes in coinage coincide exactly with gold discoveries in Sonora. If you look at what merchants are taking in gold dust and shipping to Mexico, the amount of gold dust being taken in Mexico, in Sonora specifically, which Arizona was a part of that, correlates exactly with what's being produced in the 19th century and even in the 18th century with gold coin production in Mexico. So most of the gold that they were using come from our general neighborhood, including Cañada del Oro in the old days. And even as far away as California. During the Mexican period, long before James Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill, there were Mexicans mining gold in the San Fernando Valley and other places in California, San Gabriel Canyon, and it was going to Mexico. So James Marshall really didn't discover anything. During that 8 real or the reality period in the Republic, we have a little problem with the French in Mexico. It starts in the 1850s. Mexico has all these problems going on all the time. We can't make their foreign payments. So at various points, the French, the Belgians, the Dutch, the English, they shelled Guaymas and took over the port, and you're going to pay up, and we're not going to leave until you pay up. Well, this went on a couple of times, 1854, and then again, finally the English, the French, and the Belgians, they do it again, and the French decide it's a really good opportunity to install an emperor in Mexico. So they stick in Maximilian, who was sort of a good guy, but a dupe. He winds up getting himself shot eventually. But the French were responsible for sort of introducing the decimal system into Mexican coinage in the 19th century. So I brought a series there of Maximiliano coinage, 1 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent, 50 cent, and peso. They also issued one gold coin, one denomination of 20 peso. I don't have one currently. I've had them even struck in copper patterns and whatnot, but I don't have one currently, so only the silver and the copper. After the French leave, there's some experimentation in the 1860s, late 1860s in Mexico with decimal coinage until they finally arrive at some sort of system. So I brought some of the strange 5 cent and 10 cent pieces here that are not like the other decimal coins. One of them is a capital raise type 5 cent, the other's a wreath and wording 5 cent. Then in 1869, they sort of finally arrive at a uniform system, though some of those oddball things were issued as late as 1870. They arrived at a more uniform system with a centavo, 5 centavo, 10, 25, and 50 centavo, and a peso, the balance scale series. And they do the same thing in the gold with the balance scale. You know, book of laws, the scale, and the sword, and the liberty cap over it. Same thing in the gold. During that period, there's some strange things that happened during that period too. Most of the mints that were open at that time produced balance scale pesos. Some of them at the same time they produced balance scale pesos also produced 8 reales, the old style. Some mints like Alamos and Hermosillo never produced any balance scale pesos, while all the other mints were. Nobody knows why. There were also some odd things that happened every once in a while in the 19th century. For example, 1888. For some unknown reason, every mint that was open in Mexico produced gold coins, even if they had never produced a gold coin before. And in doing that, they neglected some other stuff that they'd always produced, like $50. No one knows why. Must have been an order from Mexico City or something. You will do this, or else. But there's no record of it. Lots of the paperwork, lots of the official records and whatnot, lost in the revolution or stolen. I know in Hermosillo, some of the stuff that was in the archives way back when I was looking there has since been razor-bladed right out of the archivos. Somebody just went in and all the numismatic stuff, they just cut it out with a razor blade. It disappeared completely. That sort of thing happens a lot in Mexico. The Historical Society here repatriated a lot of pre-Columbian artifacts that were donated by people here in Tucson over the years. Well, they were given to the University in Hermosillo, and if you go and ask to see them, nobody knows where they are because they were sold out the back door. Typical. Anyway, during the 19th century, late 19th century, that token problem still goes on and on and on. To the point of we have recruiters running around in Mexico trying to find poor people, Yaqui Indians, good workers, so yeah, we'll get those guys. Sign up here, we'll give you 10 pesos in gold, and we'll buy you a new suit, just sign up here. Well, a new suit costs 5 pesos, they give the guy 10 pesos in gold, they got his signature, his X on a mark, on a contract, and the next thing he knows, he's been sold for 50 pesos in gold to somebody in Valle Grande in the plantations down south, where his life expectancy is about 5 years. But apparently 10 pesos a year was, well, you still make a profit killing the guy. He works and he gets paid in tokens, and that's about all he does, works and gets paid in tokens. During that time period, a lot of strange things happened. Chocolate used as money. Actual chocolate. Bars of soap. So, to wrap it up, I also brought some medals and tokens and some love tokens and a few things, just odd things from Mexico. But I think in Mexican coinage, there's something for almost everybody. You could pick a mint, you could pick a tokens, medals, a theme, a time period, a certain denomination of coins, and there's plenty of room for study. So, I think that's it. I don't want to bore you too much. Anybody have any questions? Anything? Marty?
Can you talk about the pesos during the revolution where they said Europe?
I'm aware of that. Yeah, I was kind of going to leave that 20th century stuff in the revolution for like something else. But yeah, Huerta, president of Mexico, who Francisco Villa didn't like, actually put a bounty on Villa's head. And I guess at one time Villa was even arrested somehow by Huerta's forces. So under Pancho Villa, they actually issued coins that say Muera Huerta, which is death to Huerta on the coin. Those with federal forces at the time could get you executed if you had one. And yet they circulated as money. But I guess if the option is fight or starve to death, well, okay, I'll fight. That's it? Good? All right, I won't take up any more of your time.
The copper bells that you said early on, what was the time period that they were?
They start about 1200, and for practical purposes, they run up into the conquest. Though in West Mexico, they circulated as money all the way into the 1550s. You think of the Spaniards just coming in and just quelling all the Indians, but that didn't happen overnight. The Tarascan kingdom that were allies of the Spanish against the Aztecs were sort of allowed to be autonomous for almost 50 years until it was decided, hey, we want your land too. So.
The reason I ask is the Hohokam that were native to the Tucson area that were using copper bells.
They were traded from down there.
From Mexico.
Yeah. In Casas Grandes in Chihuahua, they actually found in excavations there, they actually found a room that apparently they were producing copper bells there. And those copper bells have been found as far north as Utah, not made here. But conversely, turquoise from Arizona, Nevada, and Utah is found all the way down the west coast of Mexico. Metalwork probably came to West Mexico full-blown from South America with long trade canoe travel, or long-range canoe travel for trade, especially off the west coast of Mexico. Ecuadorians were mounting big expeditions, way back, like 1,000 years ago, and coming to the west coast of Mexico to get spondylus, spiny oyster shell for beads. All those little tiny red beads and all those pre-Columbian graves in Peru and Ecuador, they came from the west coast of Mexico. It's not a Peruvian shell. So everything's all kind of interrelated somewhere. Oh, I brought one other thing I didn't mention. I brought, gold, of course, was traded as artifacts. The stuff the Spanish were after. This is a little piece from Monte Albán, Oaxaca. This actually was given to me when I was 12 years old by a lady named Grace Blakesky, who had a store on Olvera Street in Los Angeles. First place I had a job. Her husband had given money in the 1920s to Alfonso Caso, famous Mexican archaeologist who excavated at Monte Albán and found the famous Tomb 7, which at the time was sort of like the King Tut's tomb of the New World, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gold objects. Most of the stuff that you see in the books, Aztec gold, is really Mixteca gold, and most of it came out of that tomb in Monte Albán. Anyway, this little piece was given by Alfonso Caso to Grace Blakesky, and she gave it to me. So, well, that's it. I will sit down. It's hot out here.